Welcome to Grosse Pointe Congregational Church for our Sunday worship. We're glad to have you with us. Enjoy our sermon this morning. Following the message, you'll find a link to give to our church, as well as a web link so you can visit our church website for upcoming future church events. Many of our events are done over Zoom. We hope that you'll be able to attend any or all of our scheduled activities. God's blessings be with you. Enjoy our message from Sunday morning. The morning of the first Easter was not a time of calm reflection and mediation and meditation. Instead, it was a morning of emotion, intensity, and action. Mary Magdalene went to the tomb to mourn Jesus' death, yet when she discovered the stone had been removed from the entrance to the tomb, she immediately ran to report this information to the disciples. She ran to Simon Peter and the disciple Jesus loved, whom some assume is named John, the author of the gospel. Then she, Simon Peter, and John ran back to the tomb. John, the other disciple, outran Simon Peter and Mary, but remained outside the tomb to wait for the other two to arrive. Finally, arriving at the tomb, Simon Peter immediately ran into the tomb while John waited outside, perhaps waiting for Mary to arrive. Finally, he joined Simon Peter in the tomb and saw that indeed Jesus' body was missing, just as Mary had described. After some time, both men left Mary alone, who collapsed beside the tomb from mental and physical exhaustion. After all, she'd been like the superhero Flash. She first ran away from the tomb, then dashed back to the tomb with the other two disciples. Mary was like a long-distance runner running a marathon on Easter morning, which creates a curious irony. Prior to 1972, women were not allowed to compete in marathons outside of the Olympics. It was believed that women couldn't run long distances, claiming these types of foot races were too taxing for women. Thus, women were barred from running. That all changed 50 years ago today, when on April 17th, 1972, the Boston Marathon officially reversed their 75-year ban on women participating in a foot race and allowed them to run for the first time. This isn't to say that women who didn't try to sneak into the race, simply to prove that women truly were capable of participating in a foot race. But sadly, most of the women who attempted to join the race would encounter police officers and race officials who would escort them off the course. Or in the case of one woman, she was blocked by the officials so she couldn't pass the finish line, even though she ran the entire course. And then there was Catherine Switzer, who entered the race as KV Switzer, a male, or so people assumed. She managed to run all the way to the race line before she had her running bib stolen from her from an angry fan. Yet even when the Boston Marathon reversed their decision to ban women from racing in 1972, there was great resistance and great apprehension. If the 9 women who registered for the race failed to cross the finish line, it would prove that women were not capable of running long distances. With great delight, all 9 women crossed the finish line. And this became a turning point for female marathoners, just as that first Easter morning was a turning point for Mary Magdalene, the disciples, women and men around the world. When Mary discovered the stone had been rolled away, she initially assumed grave robbers had been at work. This is evident when she proclaimed her concerns to Simon Peter and the other disciple that she didn't know where they laid him. In her proclamation that Jesus was missing, she referred to Jesus as the Lord and to herself as we. By doing this, she identified herself as part of the community of Jesus believers, a spot that was typically ascribed only to males. And notice, the men didn't stop her to mansplain to her that she didn't actually belong to their circle of believers, or that her claim was misguided. Rather, they took her seriously and they ran together to the tomb. For the early Christian church, they would have found nothing surprising about Mary's claim and her ability to run with men to the tomb, as they viewed women with high esteem, just as Jesus did. And as we see in Paul's early letters, as he thanked Priscilla, Persis, Thyprosa, and Thyphrena for their leadership in the congregations where they preached and proclaimed the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. Returning to the scene in the tomb, John enters the tomb with Simon Peter, and he saw and believed. This is not to suggest that he believed that Jesus had risen from the grave, but just that something amazing was happening. And after he sees the empty tomb, he simply returns home. At this point, as the Gospels point out, they did not understand the scriptures that he must rise from the dead. John and Simon Peter effectively dropped out of the race, but not Mary. After catching her breath, she leaned over to look into the tomb and saw two angels dressed in white. A moment later, she turns to see a man whom she assumes is the gardener. Boy, what a morning for Mary. She starts the day with mourning, which turns into frustration, followed by confusion, and finally, she experiences incredible joy. She experienced all the emotions of a Boston Marathon runner. For Mary, like the Boston Marathoners, there's a point in the marathon when runners are tempted to drop out as doubts creep into their minds, claiming, "You won't be able to finish this race." Their sides begin to cramp. The weather typically is not cooperative, and it's possible that once runners recall they still have to defeat Heartbreak Hill at mile 20, a steep half-mile hill climb, suddenly their minds are tempted to doubt, to fear, to give up. Yet, though Simon Peter and John returned home, Mary hung in there. She kept going. She pushed through the struggle and the pain so that she opened her eyes and saw something incredible. She witnessed Jesus living in the flesh. She heard his voice and realized all the predictions of his death and resurrection were true. Witnessing this astonishing event, Mary has another turning point in her life as Jesus commissions her as the first disciple to proclaim his resurrection. He orders her to run and keep running, and to tell the other disciples what she had seen and heard and what he has told her. Mary entered the home stretch toward the goal as she's equipped with a third wind, a new command, to utilize her voice to teach that Jesus is no longer dead. Instead, he is alive. Mary ran back to the disciples and proclaimed the message that we embraced this morning, that Jesus is alive. And not just alive, he lives within each of us, so we can embrace the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. These last 2 years, we've experienced something akin to a marathon. We've had our highs and we've had our lows with COVID. We've also had our highs and lows with a flood we suffered this past summer as our whole bottom layer of the church was pretty much destroyed. And like Mary, and like those two disciples, we've been tempted to give up. Perhaps we were similar to Simon Peter and the other disciple, and we simply wanted to stop being part of the race. Yet when Simon Peter and the other disciple heard Mary's message and later saw Jesus firsthand, they returned and joined with Mary to spread the good news that they too had seen the Lord. This morning, we've heard Mary's proclamation, and we know Jesus is alive. He has risen, and he gives us direction as he guides us into the mission field, so we spread the news of God. We see Jesus in our midst, and we see him in the people around us as he establishes a future for us, a future where, whether we're wearing masks or not, it is a future with each other, a future filled with opportunities for us to see God and make the impossible turn into the possible, and to see God resurrect lifeless areas into places of life, a place where, whatever our gender, we're equally recognized by Christ and equally equipped to preach and spread the fantastic news of Christ, as we are all sent into the world to make disciples of the world. And whatever marathon we encounter, no matter the challenge, wonderfully, we don't approach it alone. We have the support of Jesus, and we have a support of a cloud of witnesses who are with us, supporting us and cheering us onward as we set off and do God's good work. After all, We serve a God who brings the dead back to life. We are loved by a God who has resurrection power and can roll the stone away and surprise us with many empty tombs. God arrives to provide us with undreamed of possibilities. And God, through Easter, says, this race is hardly over. See, Mary is already on the run, and we're encouraged today to follow her lead, to run this good race and spread the good news of God's love and Jesus' resurrection power. May God bless us as we remain in this marathon of faith and run this good race, leaning always with Christ.